Hello class, the topic of my video is the origins of the transition from marine to terrestrial life, how lobe-finned fish evolved into terrestrial amphibians, and I chose this topic because the fossil record of this tetrapod evolution during the late Devonian is particularly good, and it's very easy to track various morphological and skeletal changes that these tetrapods underwent. The main article that I'll be using is titled The Greatest Step in Vertebrate History, a Paleobiological Review of the Fish Tetrapod Transition, but I'll also be using many other research papers as needed. This was written by John A. Long and Malcolm Gordon, and I'm going to be breaking down tetrapod evolution into four main groups that are significant steps along this evolutionary line, eventually producing land-dwelling amphibians. The first group I'll go over is the lobe-finned or sarcopterygian fish, and they are a subclass of the osteichthyes or bony fish class. And we still have two extant groups of these guys. They are the coelacanths and lungfish, actually. And we originally know that the class diverged from ray-finned fishes around 450 million years ago, and pretty much saw immediate success, particularly during the Devonian, where we have over 100 species from both freshwater and marine environments being found. One genus that we know is closely related to tetrapods, named Eusthenopteron, was found in Quebec, Canada, and its discovery was so important because we had preservation of its fin skeletal structures, and those structures actually matched that of all tetrapods that followed it. So Eusthenopteron had a humerus, a radius, and an ulna, similar to the humerus, radius, and ulnas present in humans, but these likely were not used to actually push it across terrestrial ground, and instead were more closely related to navigating the shallow water systems that we know Eusthenopteron inhabited, so navigating sediment or other debris within these river systems, but not like fully pushing it across the ground. The next group I'll talk about are proto or aquatic tetrapods. This group is primarily made up of transitional species that have traits of both lobe-finned fish and highly developed tetrapods. The best examples of this group come in Pandoricthys and Tiktaalik. I'll first go over Pandoricthys, which was found in Latvia and was primarily useful because it shows even more advanced development of these dorsal fins. In the paper Boisvert et al., there were CT scans of a Pandoricthys fossil taken, and we can actually see the earliest evidence of the development of digits within this fossil. We could see 4 small bony developments on the end of these dorsal fins, which were obviously the precursors to fingers and digits to come in later tetrapods. Tiktaalik, however, out of Nunavut, Canada, was a little further developed than Pandoricthys. They both were aquatic tetrapods with very similar front fin structures and flat skulls, but the crucial difference was in Tiktaalik's pelvis. Neil Shubin, the author of Your Inner Fish, was crucial in proving that the pelvis of Tiktaalik was much closer to that of true tetrapods like Acanthostega than it was to lobe-finned fish like Eusthenopteron. And because of how large and developed it was, it pointed scientists to think that the hind fins of Tiktaalik were actually semi-weight-bearing and were used to propel it forward. Even in a very similar species, Pandoricthys, this likely wasn't the case, and it more kind of waddled or flopped sideways to propel itself and wasn't really bearing any weight in these hind fins. A big marker for the difference between proto-tetrapod fish like Tiktaalik and the next group, true tetrapods, is the existence of digits on the end of an organism's limbs. The species Acanthostega out of East Greenland actually had 8 of these digits. Acanthostega had 4 highly developed limbs as well as lungs to breathe on land, but it still was closely tied to the water as it usually used its gills to breathe and had a large spiny tail used to propel it through the water. While its limbs were highly developed and aided it in traversing land, they were primarily used within the water to lift its head above the water, grab onto debris, and paddle around. The final group I'll discuss is terrestrial tetrapods and amphibians. The first generally recognized amphibians is the species Ichthyostega, which is 363 million years old. It's out of Greenland, and this species was still highly reliant upon aquatic environments like Acanthostega was, but crucially, it did not have gills. Its limbs had 5 digits each, and a much smaller tail fin, but was still quite unlikely to have walked on land like modern-day lizards do. Its limbs lacked ankle joints to allow its flipper-like feet to sit flat on the ground, so they could not fully bear the animal's weight, meaning it likely moved more like a seal than a modern lizard. The last species of tetrapod I'll discuss, Peterpes finiae, is the first vertebrate species we do understand to fully walk terrestrially. Peterpes was a large lizard-like amphibian from 348 million years ago in Scotland. The species crucially had ankles and wrist joints which allowed their feet to bend and sit flat on the ground and push forward off of it. They also rotated their feet inward as compared to Ichthyostega, which also allowed them to push forward and move terrestrially. Peterpes was also reliant on water, specifically for reproduction and hunting, and we know this because of certain sensory organs that it possessed that detected changes in water pressure. However, the species was certainly a massive step forward for terrestrial vertebrates, as it could propel itself on land without dragging its torso. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that because of how good the tetrapod fossil record is, it preserved many of the major morphologic advancements which allowed tetrapods to transition to land, and these changes were the development of a radius in an ulna in Eusthenopteron, a complex pelvis in Tiktaalik, digits in Acanthostega, and the ability to fully walk terrestrially in Peterpes finiae. Thank you.